2019, starting off with question 19. Which phase of the business cycle is most likely to be characterized by an increasing positive output gap? In which stage does the positive output gap keeps on increasing? It's a good question, a little tricky, not very tricky. At which stage does the positive output gap keeps on increasing? They are saying which phase is most likely to be characterized by an increasing positive output gap. Okay. Now, where do you have a positive output gap? In a contraction, right? You can have. Now, yes, in a contraction, what happens? Now, let's say during the initial contraction, during a recession, what can you tell about the positive output gap? In a contraction, what's happening to the positive output gap? Now I'm hoping you all know, right, how the business cycle looks like. Here there is the potential output. Now I'm talking about the actual output falling down. So what's happening? The positive output gap is decreasing. No, in a contraction, what happens? The positive output gap is decreasing. What happens during an expansion? During an expansion is where the positive output gap is increasing. No, this has to be your correct one. Now, some of you all will ask, sir, now, sir, in a peak also you have a positive output gap, no, sir. Why can't that be the answer? Now, peak is the topmost point, right? You always say a peak also there is a positive output gap. But remember, the question is not asking, right? One thing they're asking about a phase. Forget about a phase. They're asking where the positive output gap is increasing. Now, in a peak, the positive output gap is not increasing. In a peak, the positive output gap is the highest. So, in the expansion phase only, the positive output gap keeps on increasing, right? So, be very careful with how they word the question. Now, the same question can be repeated in your year. They can ask you, at which phase is the positive output gap maximized? So then it must be a peak, right? So positive output gap decreasing means a negative gap. No. Now see, just now if you look at this, right? Here you have your potential output. Here you have your actual output, right? So this phase is called expansion. Now, what is your output gap? This, right? The difference between this and this. Now see, during an expansion, the positive output gap is increasing. Now, during a contraction, you can't say there is. Now, contraction is the whole thing, right? But during the initial stage of a contraction or during a recession, you can't say that it's a negative output gap. Now, during a recession, look at this. The positive output gap is decreasing here, no? Little by little, it's decreasing. After that, it goes to a negative, yes. But be very careful. When you say expansion, it's the full thing. Contraction is a full thing. So, is that clear, guys? Are all okay? Are all able to figure it out when they say this increase and decrease and all of that? Be very careful. Don't jump and go for a peak. Fine. Now, we'll move to the next. Question 20. Which of the following is a component of gross value added at basic price? What do you think? Is a component of GVA at basic price. Now, GVA at basic price, we get in two approaches. One is the output approach, and the other is what? The other is the expenditure. No, other is the income approach. Output and the income approach. What do we get? We get GVA. So we'll look at this. Is intermediate consumption a component of gross value added? Yes or no? Intermediate consumption is there in the gross value added equation. It's there. Just because it's there in the equation, can we say it's a component? No, right? Intermediate consumption is deducted from gross value of output. You're removing it. So you can't say it's a component, it's minus. Now, for example, this is like someone saying, sir, in GDP, right? Sir, in GDP, we include imports because in the GDP equation, C plus I plus G, X minus M. So imports are there no in GDP, so we include. No, we are removing imports, minus M. Same logic over here, right? So this one is not there, right? Guys, what do you think about 2? Answer number 2, the one that says changes in inventory. Yes, under which approach do you get changes in inventory? Income, output, or expenditure? Changes in inventory. Income, really? Go look at your equation. Changes in inventory comes under the expenditure approach. In the expenditure approach, do we calculate something called a gross value added at basic price? Is there under the expenditure approach? No, right? You don't have something called a gross value. There is a GDE, GDP, that is there, right? So therefore, this is also not your answer. Acquisition of valuables. Under which approach do we have this? Acquisition of valuables. That is also in the expenditure approach, right? Remember, changes in value under expenditure approach inside gross investment or inside gross domestic capital formation, there's something called changes in value. That is what you call this acquisition of valuables. Expenditure approach, no GVA, cut. Taxes less subsidies on the products. Is it included in GVA? Do we have taxes less subsidies? No, right? It's included in GDP because from GVA, we add taxes less subsidies, then we get to GDP. So taxes less subsidies is there in GDP, but that is not there in GVA. Then you're left with this final answer. Other taxes less subsidies on production. How? Remember the income approach. How do you calculate GVA using the income approach, guys? First component is compensation of employees. Second component is gross operating surplus. What's your third component? Your third component? What's your third component? Yeah, mixed income, you can consider it inside gross operating surplus. What's the other one then? What's after that? That is other taxes. Go to your note and check. It's other taxes less subsidies on production. So you add all of this, you get GVA at basic price. To this, if you add net taxes on products, or in other words, taxes less subsidies on products, then you get GDP at market price. So which one of this? Yes, that is what you call net indirect taxes, net taxes less subsidies on products. So when they say other taxes less subsidies on production, that is a component of GVA. Someone asked me the fourth one. Now see, taxes less subsidies on product is not a component. See, we add it over here. That is not there in GVA. From to GVA, when you add that only, you go to GDP. So you can't say taxes less subsidies on product is there in GVA. Wrong. Yeah. So be very careful. Now, is that clear, guys? Example for third and fourth option given in this question. So acquisition of valuables, for example, things like gold, jewelry, right? So even let's say gems, right? So when people purchase those kind of things, you know, and they purchase those valuables, you can include it there. Acquisition of valuables. Taxes less subsidies on products, that is net indirect taxes, guys. Taxes on normal goods and services. So excise, VAT, sales tax, all of those. Okay. Yes. If I ask you this, right? Changes in inventory is the difference between your opening and the closing stock. Let's say a factory, at the beginning they had 1,000 shirts. At the end of the year they have let's say 1,200 shirts. The difference between the opening and the closing, that's what you call changes in inventory. Okay. Yes, if I ask you this, right? Subsidies on products are included in gross value added at basic price. Yes or no? True or false? Subsidies on products are included or is already inside gross value added at basic price. Yes or no? Subsidies on products are included in gross value added at basic price. What do you all think? The answer is yes. Because it is included now, guys, we are minusing. See, from gross value added at basic price, we are adding taxes on products and we are minusing subsidies on products. So we are minusing subsidies on products means it's included in this, right? So subsidies on products are included in GVA at basic price. This is true. If I ask you, subsidies on products are included in GDP at market price, is this true or false? Subsidies on products is included in GDP. That no, because we have deducted it. No, that is false. So if you did not understand, guys, take some time to think. That's a little bit of homework for you all, a little bit outside the question, for you all to figure out whether you all really understood what is this, what does this addition and subtraction mean. I don't want you to just memorize the equation, know what that means. Okay, right. Yes, maybe because of a trans, you can take that. Okay, we'll come to it. Okay, 21. Which of the following household purchases? Okay, this one I explained last class. If you were there, you can give me an answer. Which of the following household purchases will be counted as a component of gross private investment in estimating a country's GDP using the expenditure approach? I told you all, there is something that the household spend, but you don't include it under consumption, you include it under gross investment. Which one? Sovereign bonds, shares of a company, debentures, a new car, a newly constructed house. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you all were there last class, you all can give me an answer unless you were daydreaming. Yes, I did explain this before. The answer is number 5. Yes, one more thing, right? Just because I remembered, when you all do the past paper, study the past paper, right? Don't just do the past paper and close and keep. Now I'm hoping you all have, like I always say, printed the PDF that I have sent you. You all are nicely filing all the PDFs, printed ones, your answers, everything. You all are keeping it. Study those, right? Because you all see, same question comes no. So the more you study studying the past paper doesn't mean memorizing the answer, right? Learn from it, and then you see it gets very easier and easier. Okay, now, we'll go to the next. 22. Which of the following is considered a property income? What do you think? Wages and salaries, interest, employer contribution to EPF, non-life insurance claims, subsidies. Okay. What are the property resources? Tell me, what are the property resources? We learned this in unit number 1. There are some human resources, there are property resources. So, what are the property resources? So, property resources is land and capital. So, what's the return for land? What's the income for land? For land, it's rent. For capital, it's interest. So, rent and interest can be considered as property income. Land and capital are property resources. For those property resources, the return you get can be considered as property income. So which one? This answer does not talk about rent. You only have interest in this answer. So therefore, the answer can be what? Answer can be interest. Now, wages and salaries, why can't you take that? Because wages and salaries are the return for what? Are the return for labor. Now, is labor a property resource? No. Labor is a human resource. So it's not the most correct one. Yeah. You if they ask which of the following is considered as a factor income, then even wages and salaries are correct, because labor is also a factor of production. Wage and salary is also factor income. But they are not asking for factor income. They are asking for property income. Be very careful. Okay. Any question? Right. Is this wages and salaries, EPF, insurance, different subsidies, all of this can go under compensation of employees, guys. So it's like the return that you get for labor. Now, sometimes when you work in certain places, they give you insurance policy. They might give you certain subsidies. Then they pay for your EPF. So those are all connected to labor. Yeah. Now, right. How did you all do so far in this paper? 2019, there were 1, 2, 3, and 4 questions. 4 out of 4, 3, 2. How much? Others? Right. Good. Okay. So 2019 done. We'll go to 2020.